This one's pretty good. I like this one. It's basically just writing on the coattails of some of the other novels, especially Dead Sky Black Sun. The killing. This is the book after the Killing Ground, and the Killing Ground is just never mind. Part 1. Pure of heart and strong of body. A traitor had once made his home among the tumbled slopes of the Ozen Hills. The late Casimir de Valtos had dwelt in a lofty, marble-fronted villa, finely constructed and lavishly appointed with every amenity his wealth and position could provide. His extensive estate ran with game. Servants attended to his every need, and the thousands of workers that slaved in his many weapon mills, engine assembly yards, and artillery manufactorium could only dream of their master's luxurious lifestyle. Wealth, position, and power had been his, but now the traitor was dead, and his estate was overgrowing. His palatal demise little more than stumps of stonework, scattered throughout waving fields of untended grass. Vengeful workers had looted his villa of anything worth stealing in the wake of the civil war that his schemes had unleashed. They had cast its walls into ruin and set fires where once he had plotted to become an immortal god. Such were the dreams of men, grandiose and fleeting. An ornamental lake rippled in the sunlight before the ruined villa, fed by an underground aqueduct linked to the wide river that flowed south from Timber Ridge to the north. The river cut a path through the DeValtos estate, splitting into dozens of narrow watercourses as it threaded its way through the undulant terrain. Eventually, these smaller rivers came together and meandered southwards to join the Brandon River on its journey to the ocean to the west. Though the DeValtos lands were abandoned, the landscape silent and the forest growing wild, they were far from empty. Scattered throughout the Oswin Hills, stealthy observers patiently kept watch on the many sharp gullies and shadow valleys. The traitor was dead, but his lands were still important. A tremor in the grass was the first sign of movement, a barely discernible bow wave, as a stealthy humanoid figure in olive-colored armor ghosted slowly from the trees at the base of a low hill. It moved gracefully, crouched over, its every step carefully placed as its helmeted head swung back and forth, scanning the terrain with the eye of a patient hunter. Or a scout, thought Uriel Ventress from his position of concealment in a tumbled fan of rocks on the slopes of the hill before the ruined villa. Soon the other scouts followed the first from the trees, moving in pairs as they eased towards the fallen stones of the DeValtos villa. There were 8 in total, their movements slick and professional. Though the scouts advanced with a smooth, precise gait, there was something fundamentally wrong with their movements, something inhuman. Their posture was subtly different, as if their bone structure wasn't quite right, or their feet were shaped differently to those of humans. The Ultramarines had learned much of the ways of the Tau in their rapidly expanding empire on the killing fields of Malbidi, Praetonus V, and Agora. That experience was being put to good use here in Pavonis. The lead scout reached the edge of the ruins and placed a gloved hand on the side of his helmet, a tapered dome with a Vox aerial on one side and a gem-like optical device on the other. Watching the scout spread out, Uriel saw they had read the ground well, just as he had done earlier that day. A flashing icon lit up on the inner surface of Uriel's helmet visor, an insistent urging from his senior sergeant to release the killing position of his warriors. He ignored it for the time being. Instincts honed on 100 battlefields were telling Uriel that the prey was not fully in the killing box, and the risk of their target detecting box traffic was too great. No sooner had the scout finished his silent communication than a prowling vehicle with curved flanks emerged from the trees. It had the bulk of a tank, but hovered just above the ground, bending the stalks of grass as it drew close to the scouts. A rotary barreled cannon spun lazily on its tapered prow, and flaring dorsal engines kept it aloft with a barely audible hum. The tank was unmistakably alien, its curved lines and silent menace putting Uriel in the mind of a shark prowling the seabed. From the intelligence files Uriel had read en route to Bavanas from Macrogh, he recognized it as a devilfish, a troop carrier, analogous to the Rhino. It was fast, agile, and armored to the front, but vulnerable to attacks to the rear. Codex ambush tactics would serve them well here. The alien tank came to a halt, and a pair of flat discs with underslung weapon mounts detached from the vehicle's front fins. They hovered just above the tank, switching sensor spines, rotating on their upper surfaces. Sniffer dogs. Uriel glanced anxiously across the grassy mounds spread throughout the ruins of the Devoltos villa. Apparently satisfied that there was nothing in the immediate vicinity, the hovering discs returned to their mounts on the devilfish, and the lead scout unsnapped a device from a rigid backpack he wore. Uriel watched a pair of thin legs extend from the device, and the scout planted it in the ground in front of him. Lights flickered on the domed surface of the device, and Uriel's auto senses detected a low-level pressure sweep over the low-level pressure pulse sweep over the landscape. Some kind of three-dimensional some sort of three-dimensional cartographic device? Imperial forces that had fought the Tau before had christened these warriors Pathfinders, and the name was an apt one. These troops were thrown out ahead of an army to reconnoiter the ground before it and plot the best routes of advance. The Pathfinders were working quickly, and every second Uriel delayed gave them more time to detect his warriors. The Ultramarines were in place, and as Uriel watched the enemy scouts at work, he knew it was time to unleash them. Primary units, engage, he whispered into his throat mic, knowing it was the last order he would need to issue in this engagement. The Pathfinder's head snapped up as soon as the words left Uriel's mouth. But it was already too late for the Tau. Two Space Marines from Uriel's Devastator section rose from the rocks to the east of the ruined villa, carrying bulky missile launchers on their shoulders. The Tau scattered, and the Devilfish's engines rose and pitched as the driver angled his frontal section towards the threat. Uriel smiled grimly as the Devastators fired their weapons, the missiles swooshing through the air on arcing contrails of smoke. The first detonated above a pair of Pathfinders as they sought to reach the cover of the trees, shredding their bodies into torn masses of butchered meat and shattered armored plates. The second slammed into the frontal armor of the Devilfish with a thunderous bang, followed by a smeared explosion of black smoke and shrapnel. The Devilfish rocked under the impact of a missile, but its armor remained intact. Its rotary cannon spooled up, and a burst of heavy caliber shell blitzed from the weapon, tracing a blazing arc between the tank and its attackers. The ground above the villa exploded as the hillside disintegrated under the blizzard of impacts. But Uriel's warriors had already ducked back into cover. The roaring of the cannon was tremendous, but Uriel still heard the metallic cough of two more missiles being launched. He glanced over to the west, where the other half of the Devastator section opened fire. The tank tried to reverse his turn, but the missiles were faster. One punched through the rear assault ramp, and the other slammed into the left engine nozzle. The back of the Devilfish exploded in a spray of red-hot fragments, scything down another Pathfinder. A secondary blast completed its destruction, and the blazing vehicle crashed to the ground. Uriel rose from the rocks and locked his bolter in the crook of his arm. Behind him, a 10-strong squad of blue-armored space marines rose with him, matching his pace as he set off towards the killing ground. The surviving aliens made for the cover of the villa, but Uriel knew they wouldn't reach it. As the Pathfinders reached the ruined dwelling, the grassy mounds within its fallen walls shifted, and a combat squad of Ultramarine scouts cast off their camo cloaks. The scouts opened fire, bolter rounds punching through lightly armored Pathfinders and hurtling them from their feet. Two were killed instantly, and a third screamed in agony as the explosion of a mass reactive shell ripped his arm from his shoulder. The two remaining Pathfinders returned fire, their rifles spitting bright rounds among the scouts and dazzling bursts of light and sound. The aliens fired at last, one more defiant burst before fleeing for the trees, all presence of stealth forgotten in their desire to escape the trap that had been set for them. Uriel dropped to one knee and swung his gleaming eagle-plated bolter to his shoulder. The weapon's targeting mechanism was synced to his helmet, and he tracked the zigzagging pattern of the enemy warriors for a moment before pulling the trigger. The bolter slammed back with a fearsome recoil, and the Pathfinder dropped, the bottom half of his right leg pulped by the shell's detonation. Seeing that escape wasn't an option, the last Tau warrior halted and threw down his weapon. He turned and began walking back towards the blazing wreck of the Devilfish with his hands in the air. "You've gotten rusty with your targeting rituals," said a voice at Uriel's side. "You were aiming for the middle of his back, weren't you?" Uriel turned and slung his bolter. Then he reached up to disengage the vacuum seals in his gorget. Pressurized air hissed, and he lifted his golden-winged helmet clear. He turned towards the speaker, a space marine in the livery of a veteran sergeant of the Ultramarines, his red helmet encircled by a white laurel wreath. "I was," admitted Uriel. "And you're right about the targeting rituals. I fell out of the habit while I was away." "Best to get back in that habit, then. Quickly." "I will," said Uriel, surprised at the sergeant's caustic tone. "We should get down there. The scouts are securing the prisoner," said the sergeant before making his way down the hill. Uriel nodded and followed Lurchus. Wow, Liarchus. It wasn't Pasanis. A great challenge to reading out loud is trying to figure out who's talking before it says it, because if you take the time to try to actually read it, you're going to lose the rhythm. The show must go on. Nobody wants to hear a book with a loading screen. So I really do. I think it's better to make a mistake and roll with it, or make a mistake and say, "Oh, wow, I made a mistake," and try to learn from it. Because after a while, like, the really good authors, they write their dialogue differently for each of their characters. I thought it was Pausanias just because Pausanias is a veteran sergeant and he's always at Uriel's side. So I think that Graham McNeil, the author of this book, he wrote that to throw me off. He wrote that there, making me expect that there was Pausanias, but it wasn't. So that's pretty cool. I think they're about to meet one of the new characters in this book. She is a Tau Fire warrior, and she's a bit snippy. But the reason I like her is you really get to see inside the mind of the alien. It's kind of almost preposterous to think of her as a she. She's not even a human. Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess we call animals. I guess we call animals she's. But I guess what I'm trying to say is she is not a woman. She is a fucking alien. And there's a big difference there. I tried to keep the cursing as minimal when I read. My apologies. It felt good to lead warriors in combat, even if his involvement had been minimal once the planning had been done. Smoke from the smoldering devilfish caught in the back of Uriel's throat, the trace chemicals triggering a number of sensory impulses within. He tasted the abrasive compounds used to etch the insignia on the vehicle's hull, the alien lubricants used on the engine mounts, and the coarse, roasted scent of the seared crew. Uriel ran a hand over his scalp, the dark hair cut short. A band of silver had developed at his temples to his gray storm cloud eyes, and they were sharp as ever. Cut from a classical mold, Uriel's features were angular and sharp, without the distinctive flattening common to some members of the Adeptus Astartes. His physique was lean for a space marine, although, cloaked in his new armor, he was bulky and fearsome, as the rest of his warriors. The sword of Adeus was belted at Uriel's waist, and a green cloak hung from his shoulders, secured with a pin in the shape of a white rose that recalled his last journey to Pavanis. Uriel surveyed the utter destruction of the enemy as Learchus followed the warriors of the Fourth Company, and they formed a perimeter around the site of the ambush. Two space marines guarded the Tau prisoner, the only survivor of the ambush, who knelt facing an upright slab with his hands on his head. A pair of Rhino APCs idled on what had once been a wide gravel driveway. Their side doors were wide open, and a Space Marine gunner manned the Stormbolter mounted on the vehicle's forward cupola. The kill team of scouts gathered their photo-absorptive camo cloaks from the ruins, cloaks that ensured the first inkling most targets had of the scouts' presence was the sound of the shot that blew their head off. Watching Learchus issue his orders, Uriel was struck by how his friend had changed since he and Pausanias had marched from the fortress of Hera into exile. Learchus had promised to look after Uriel's warriors, and he had done a fine job rebuilding the company after the losses taken on Tarsus Ultra, and leading its warriors in battle against a host of orcs on Espandor. The sergeant's orders were obeyed with alacrity and respect, and though Uriel was sure it was just his imagination, it was as though Learchus carried himself a little taller than before. Command had been good for him, it seemed. Uriel beckoned to Learchus, walking towards the wreckage of the devilfish. "Sergeant," said Uriel, as Learchus approached and snapped to attention. Learchus hammered his fist against his breastplate and then reached up to remove his helmet. Learchus was everything a space marine should be: tall, proud, with a regal countenance that was the image of the heroes carved in luminous marble upon the steps of the Temple of Correction of Macrog. His blond hair was cropped tightly to his skull, his features wide and clearly of the most illustrious lineage. Each of the worlds of Ultramar had differing quirks of genetics that no amount of gene enhancement could eradicate, making it easy to identify from where a warrior hailed. Learchus had unmistakably been a native of Macrog, fortress world of the Ultramarines, and a planet from which the greatest heroes had marched into the pages of legend. Captain, said Learchus, is everything all right? Everything is in hand, said Learchus. Sentries are in place, enemy weapons are gathered, and I have deployed long-range pickets to watch for fellows for their forces. Very good, said Uriel, keeping his tone light. But that's not what I was asking. And what are you asking? Are you planning on leaving me anything to do? Everything that needs attending to is being done, replied Learchus. What orders are left to give? I am the captain of this company, Learchus, said Uriel, hating that he sounded so petulant. The orders to give are mine. Learchus was too controlled to show much in the way of emotion, but Uriel saw a shadow cross his face and guessed the reason for a stiff formality. He decided not to press the point. The company's leaders had to be seen to display unity of purpose, especially now, so soon after Uriel's return. Of course. Sorry, sir. We'll talk about this later, said Uriel, turning and marching towards the captured Pathfinder. Now let's see what our prisoner has to say for himself. The alien heard their approaching steps and turned his helmeted head to face them. One of the Space Marine guards delivered a sharp blow to the alien's neck with the butt of his bolter, and it sagged against the stub of broken wall with a shrill yelp of pain. The captive gripped the stonework, and Uriel saw he had only 4 fingers on each hand. Get him up, said Uriel. Learchus reached down and hauled the prisoner to his feet. Uriel was impressed by his defiant body language. This creature was from an alien species, a race utterly apart from humanity. Yet the hostility in its posture was unmistakable. Take it off, said Uriel, miming the act of lifting off the helmet. The alien didn't move, and Uriel drew his bolt pistol, tapping the barrel against the side of the alien's helmet. Off! The Tau reached up, unsnapped a trio of clips, and a cable fed where it was attached to its armor, and lifted clear the helmet. Learchus snatched it from the alien, and Uriel found himself looking at the face of his prisoner. The creature's skin was the color of weathered lead, gray and textured, like old linen, with a sheen to it that might have been perspiration. It had a curious odor, a pungent mix of smells that Uriel found impossible to place, part animal, part burned plastic, and hot spices, but wholly alien. A glossy topknot of white hair trailed from the top of its scalp to the base of its neck, held in place by gold bands studded with gems. The alien looked up at Uriel with eyes of dull red, set deep in a flat face without any visible indication of a nose. A curious vertical indentation, like an old surgical wound or birth scar, sat in the center of its forehead, and the cast of its features, though alien and strange, suggested their captor was female. The alien's amber pupils burned with hostility. This is a world of the Imperium, said Uriel. Why are you here? The alien spat a brief torrent of language, a lyrical stream of unfamiliar tones and exotic multi-part words. Uriel's enhanced cognitive faculties were able to sort out streams into word groupings, and he could make no sense of them. He hadn't expected to understand the alien's language, but held a vague hope that it might have a grasp of Imperial Gothic. Do you understand me? He said, slowly and carefully, enunciating each word. Once again, the captive spoke in her sing-song language, And Ariel knew that she simply repeated the words that she had already spoken. Do you know what it's saying? Said Learchus. No, but I don't need a translator to understand the sense of it. So what's it saying? It sounds like name, rank, and number to me. I think she's called Latian. Latian? 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 Latian. I think she's called Latian. She? Yes, said Uriel. At least I think it's female. So, what do you want done with her? Cuff her. Stick her in back of one of the rhinos. We'll take her back to the Brandon Gate and put her in the glass house, said Uriel. I have a Xenolexicon servitor brought down from Ve Victus to enable interrogation. We need to find out how many more of her are on Pavanas. You think there are more? Probably, said Uriel, moving away from the prisoner. Brandon Gate is only 6 kilometers to the east over flat and open terrain. These hills are a logical spot for an enemy force to scout with a view to attacking. Pathfinders are the eyes and ears of a Tau battle force, and I'd be surprised if her unit was operating alone. If there are other units, we'll find them, said Learchus. The after-action telemetry from Zeist campaign helped us find this one, and if this battle is anything to go by, we shouldn't have much trouble finishing them off. This wasn't a battle, said Uriel. No, said Learchus, marching in step with Uriel. What was it then? For all my adrenal system reacted once we engaged. It might have been a training exercise, said Uriel. Everything about this fight was textbook. From the diversionary shot, the concealed kill team, and the fire support group. Is that a bad thing? Asked Learchus. We executed a perfect Codex pattern ambush. The Tau were caught completely off guard. We fooled their tank into making a rudimentary maneuvering error, and then we gunned down the survivors. Would that all the engagements be fought with such precision? I agree, but the Pathfinders were incredibly lax in their advance. From what I've heard of the battles the chapter has fought against the Tau over the last few years, it's a trait I'm surprised to find in warriors with such a reputation for being careful. Perhaps they were new troops, yet to be tested in combat, suggested Learchus. That's hardly possible, conceded Uriel, although it still feels strange that we destroyed them so easily. We fight with the Codex Astartes as our guide, precisely because the order it brings to our battles makes them seem easy to those who are not schooled in its ways. I know that, Learchus. You don't need to remind me. Don't I? Said Learchus. You were exiled once already because you failed to heed its teachings. And I saw the error of my ways on Medrengard, said Uriel, fighting down his irritation at Learchus' words, even though he knew they were justified. I hope it is true. I swear to you, it is, my friend, said Uriel. I suppose it's been so long since I fought with such sublime warriors under my command, I'd almost forgotten what it is to have the advantage in a tactical situation. For so long, it was just Pausanias and I, against impossible odds. Clearly not that impossible, noted Learchus. After all, you both made it back. So I guess that's the epilogue, and it's the epilogue for this book, and it's the epilogue, or the pro. Sorry, the pro. Okay, I guess it's whatever. A prologue is an epilogue, just on a different side. But yeah, look, the reason I like Uriel Ventris, okay, the reason he's my guy, the reason he's my hero is he's scorned. He's a man scorned for doing the right thing. Okay, he could choose to play by the rules and lose. And it's not just him losing, it's everyone losing. Or he could break the rules and just have him lose. So that's what he decided to do. And that really, to me, that's what being a man is taking that fucking loss. Taking that loss. Because you've got to do what's right. You know, and that's the reason he's a hero. He's not just another gun monkey captain swinging a sword around, stabbing castles. And I think they actually talk about that in this book. Actually, this one's pretty good. This one's pretty good. But look, Uriel does what he needs to do, and what right now, like this conflict that they're setting up right now, it's prevalent. It's like, okay, are we just gonna keep doing things this way over and over again? Like, why was this easy? And that you should really ask yourself that. Why was this easy? Sometimes it is because a lot of hard work went into it. A lot of hard work and preparation. But sometimes it's because someone wants you to think it's easy. You know, in that battle, I don't really look. Ironically, in Warhammer, the battles themselves are not the highlights. It's the setup. It's the drama. But in that battle, what they did is they tricked the enemy transport so they fired at it from this direction. So the enemy transport faced in this direction, and they shot at it from this one. That's the whole battle is about. And I think Uriel right here is foreshadowing, like, hey, they're gonna do that same shit to us. They're watching us. They just watched the way we killed their friends because they want to know how they would kill their friends. Or maybe not. I don't know. I've read this book before, but it's been years.